Good day, colleagues, friends, wherever you are. Welcome to our second program of CLAMS for 2025-2026. We're going to have an excellent program for you, showcasing three really exciting academicians and colleagues who have joined us and who have given me personally the honor of hosting them. We're going to start chronologically, therefore, we're going to start with Dr. Saeed Reza Hosseini. I'm going to introduce each speaker as they come up. So, Reza. Dr. Saeed Reza Hosseini specializes in Indo-Persianate and Islamic history in the connected regions of Central Asia and North India over the longue durée, from late antiquity to the early modern era. His research is based on a wide range of documentary and literary sources in Bactrian, Sogdian, Middle Persian, Persian, and Arabic. He takes a connected historical approach to understanding these milieus and is interested in uncovering long-term patterns of intellectual and cultural exchange in the Turco-Indo-Persianate ecumene. Reza is originally from Balkh, a region in modern Afghanistan, we all know. He graduated from Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, where he studied the history of medieval Central Asia and early. Can you please turn off your sound bites? Thank you. Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, where he studied the history of medieval Central Asia and early modern India. He continued his research at Leiden University, where he learned Dutch on top of everything else, completed his second MA, and wrote a thesis on millenarism in Mughal India. He then joined the European Research Council project, also in Leiden, Embedding Conquest, and completed his PhD dissertation on the 8th century Arab conquest in Bactria. Afterwards, he joined King's College, Afterwards, he joined King's College, University of Cambridge, as a research fellow. There, he worked as part of King's Silk Roads project and organized seminars and seminar series and workshops on various aspects of the Silk Roads, including contemporary issues such as regional security and local governance in Central Asia. Reza currently teaches a course on Central Asia at Princeton University and is working on a monograph entitled The Mongols in Persian Discourse, Continuity and Change 1252-1582. He has published numerous articles already at his early career stages and on socio-political history, rebellions, slavery, and familial laws in medieval Central Asia, and has co-authored several articles on kingship in Islam and Mughal political ideology in various peer-reviewed journals. His book, fresh out of the oven, so to speak, on the Arab conquests of Bactria, local power politics and Arab domination, 651 and 750, is fresh out of the ovens and available for us all to buy. So with no further ado, I'll ask Reza to take on the platform. Reza?
Thank you very much, Parvane. I really appreciate this generous introduction. So one issue I should actually say that the book is not yet published. So but it's basically in this process, like the conquest has, different kind of process and then it's very dynamic. Any kind of book, to be published is also very dynamic and also, like taking some time. But it's coming soon. So I look forward to that. But thank you very much for inviting me to this prestigious program. And I really appreciate that you put me basically next to other scholars like Arezou and Teresa, which makes it really an amazing, team to talk about this region. So shall I just talk about the series as we talked, or like Teresa, you're
Yeah.
doing this?
Yeah, I think maybe Parvane, we decided to do it all as an integrated presentation. So if you want, you can introduce all three of us at the start, and then we just do it all together.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So then Teresa is going. Okay. Dr. Teresa Bernheimer is a historian of the Middle East in the period circa 600 to 1200 CE. She's particularly interested in the formation of Islam in the context of late antiquity and beyond. From 2009 to 2017, Teresa taught early Islamic history at SOAS University of London, in the very department which had sparked her interest and inspired her in the origins of Islam during her BA. Excuse me. Besides social history, oh, I'm sorry. It continues. Teresa received her MPhil and DPhil from Oxford. Her research has focused on the emergence of social and religious elites and their influence on the formation of Islam and Muslim societies. Her book, The Alids, the First Family of Islam, excuse me, 750 to 1200, which has come out from Edinburgh University Press in 2013 already, is a study of the descendants of the Prophet Muhammad who came to be revered by both Sunnis and Shiites. Besides social history, Teresa is interested in material evidence for the study of early Islam, particularly early Islamic coinage, and in approaches to and ways of teaching the history of Islam. Together with Tamima Bayham Daou, she edited 4 volumes in the early Islamic history. Excuse me. Early Islamic History, Critical Concepts in Islamic Studies, 4 volumes, which also came out in London in 2013, and published a 5th revised edition of the widely used textbook, Muslims, Their Religious Beliefs and Practices, with the late Andrew Rippin, that came out in 2019. Dr. Bernheimer is currently at LMU Munich, where she is the PI on the project Beyond Conflict and Coexistence, the Entangled History of Jewish-Arab Relations, funded by the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research, BMBF. She has published many articles and is currently working on a project on color terms in Judaism and Islam through the period 600 to 1200. So we have 3 excellent scholars for you lined up. Last but not least is Professor Arezou Azad, a senior research fellow at the Department of Continuing Education at the University of Oxford, and junior professor and chair of the Arts and Heritage of Afghanistan at the Institut National de Langue et Civilisation Orientale, INALCO, in Paris. She also leads the important research group of the Invisible East. Arezou is a historian of the medieval Islamicate world, medieval Islamicate East, from the coming of Islam in the 7th century to the Mongol Empire of the 13th century, and all its various component cultures and societies. Her first book was entitled Sacred Language of Medieval Afghanistan and was published by Oxford University Press also in 2013. In the Sacred Languages, Arezou explores the ways in which the multicultural region of Balkh in Afghanistan, which hosted one of the most magnificent Buddhist monasteries and temples in antiquity, became the Dome of Islam. Her second book, a fully commented translation of the medieval local history of Balkh, produced together with Edmund Herzig and Ali Mir Ansari, came out in 2020 in the Distinguished Gibb Memorial Series. Arezou is currently finishing two other books. One is a study of Bamiyan papers, looking forward, and Firuzku papers from medieval Afghanistan. The other in collaboration with Pejman Firuzbakhsh is a translation of a history of the Barmakids. Can't wait to read that one. Arezou was a lecturer in medieval history at the University of Birmingham from 2013 to 2019. She was born, and this is going to come as a surprise to you, she was born and raised in Germany, not this part. And before joining academia, served as a UN peacekeeper in the Balkans, East Timor, and other hotspots around the world. So I can't wait. I'm sure you cannot wait, and I cannot wait to hear them. And so I give the platform to my three distinguished colleagues. Please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Parvene, for inviting us and bringing us together. As I said already when we spoke briefly before the meeting, I think really just in talking together this week and trying to find a way of organizing this, we saw how much there is that we really could be exchanging and could be talking about. So thank you for sort of setting us off and giving us the opportunity.
Absolutely.
I've been tasked with.
Sorry, Teresa,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's my absolute pleasure. And I want to tell colleagues that we had decided that a conference on this theme would be fantastic. And if anybody has accommodations and funding for supporting the theme, we'll be glad to. I mean, it would be a wonderful endeavor. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Teresa. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Absolutely. So I've been tasked with chairing our meeting today, and we've really tried to find a common ground, really to highlight the things that have fascinated all three of us about working on the Bactrians, the Kharajites, the Barmakids, and so we'll talk you through this a little bit. Of course, the start or see, does this work? For having us here together, were actually some books. Sorry, this is not working. That are coming out or are about to come out or have recently come out. So we'll introduce them in just briefly now. But before that, I would just want to set us up with our discussion points. There are four things that we thought are sort of red threads that run through all our research. The one is that we're really highlighting the documentary perspective. All of us work with documents of some kind, textual documents, numismatic documents, tombstones, and through that have questioned issues around authority. So we will talk about negotiating authority. We will talk about kinship and social actors, and we will talk about the uneven legacies that our respective histories really bring into the modern period. So these are sort of the 4 points around which we have this structured each of our contributions. But before we get into this, I just want to very briefly talk, as I mentioned, about the books that were really sparked the meeting today. 2 of these are coming out in a new EUP series that Arezou, myself, and Hugh Kennedy are editing together. It is a series with Edinburgh University Press called The Islamicate East, New Approaches to Text and History. And really what this does is it focuses on new trends in the study of the medieval Eastern Islamic lands through a close reading of text and documentary sources. It publishes first-time editions with substantial introductions of newly discovered documents and local texts, situating the sources within broader historiographical and/or historical contexts. Now, the vast and diverse medieval region, which you all know, the so-called Islamicate East, was extraordinarily influential upon all neighboring societies as well. The series, the Islamicate East, New Approaches to Text and History, is the first series to really cover this region with a close focus on the text, transcriptions, translations, and annotations. It covers the territories of modern-day Afghanistan, Iran, Central Asia, Western China, and Northern India, Pakistan, from the 8th to the 15th century. And importantly, it has 2 books coming out, or that have recently come out, with Arezou. Arezou, do you want to talk about this, about your 2 new publications?
I will, and when it's my turn, I will get to them. But maybe just
okay. You don't want to talk about this now? No. Okay.
To say that the Warehouse of Bamiyan, the one in the middle, is coming out next month. The Rise and Fall of the Barmakids in February, and the Persian-Mongol histories produced by our Japanese colleagues also next month. And I think we have a slide later where they can be pre-ordered with a discount.
Yeah, thanks, Arezou. So you see there's some really exciting things coming out, which we hope will enable fruitful exchange between scholars of history, documents and manuscript studies, Iranian studies, Afghanistan studies, Islamic history, regional studies, philology, numismatics, anthropology, and more. So really this sort of interdisciplinary discussion that we're trying to or we hope we will show you today we're engaged in ourselves as well. Reza, you have a book coming out in this series, which Parvaneh also highlighted. Do you want to talk about this briefly, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Teresa, for introducing this series. As you already mentioned, Afghanistan's part of the Eastern, or say Islamicate East. I should say that it's quite important achievement for Edinburgh University Press to basically come out with this series of ancient and medieval Afghanistan, because you all know that unfortunately for a long time Afghanistan has been seen as a security issue. So like mostly, a place of failure of democracy and, violence and, cultural diminishing and so and so. So, I mean, it's quite, that picture was, say, dominant, but I'm very happy that, Edinburgh University Press is bringing basically out a civilizational aspect of this region, which is quite important because it speaks a lot, to historians and say, other scholars of this field. So this series, as I mentioned, it will be published by Edinburgh University Press and basically has 2 major editors. Warwick Ball, you all know that he's very known when it comes to archaeology of Afghanistan, and then he has published a lot, I say, basically on that, and Rachel Morris. So the importance of this series is that basically is the only book series dedicated entirely to Afghanistan from prehistoric to the Mongol period. So it's basically a long time span of history, and also brings not only Afghanistan but also connects it with the regions around it. So you can really see. It looks at the early civilizations, the Oxus, region, and also connected to the Giraffe and the regions around it. So I'm very happy that I can actually publish my book, the first book, basically on the Arab conquest with this series, because Journal of Afghanistan has already published a lot on Afghanistan, particularly when it comes to history. So it makes a kind of continuation with those, basically publications. So is in a way it is in between, Islamicate East and say ancient and medieval Afghanistan, but it talks to both of them. If I'm allowed, to talk a little bit about the book, basically, you can go to the next session. Next slide, Teresa.
This is our next slide. I think that's not what you meant, no?
No, about the book, if I can, talk a little bit, then I can show you, but.
Let's say here, this one?
Yes, exactly. So it's like, just a brief basically about this book. So this book entitled For Now, Local Power, Politics and Arab Domination, from 651 to 750 is my first book, basically. It's coming from my PhD dissertation that I did it in Leiden with under supervision of Professor Petra Seibstein. So basically, this book trying to bring a different perspective of the Arab conquest, because many of you know that Arab conquest is usually seen as a kind of Arabic centric, we're seen from an Arabic centric perspective. So it's usually big, based on the Arabic narratives, and then they show that these conquests were basically kind of linear, a kind of sequential events, organized by the caliphate and then implemented by their say commanders in different regions. But then this book basically shows like a different say picture from the conquest, particularly when it comes to the eastern part of the Islamic world. And then it actually tries to say that that this conquest were not as simplified or idealized as these Arabic, basically centric views trying to show that it was like that. It's not like that. It's very, very complicated, basically. And then also they, in a way, the book tried to give this picture that the conquest basically were changing continuously based on the local and regional circumstances. So it's not something, completely, pre-planned, in Syria or in Iraq or actually in the Hijaz. So it's more complicated than what we see in the literature. And then these are basically the big pictures it gives. But then the book, in this book, I basically make a kind of detailed discussions about the region, because I see the conquest within the socio-political, cultural context in this region. So I don't see it from the top down, you can see, but mostly from the bottom up to see, how this basically region understood so the conquest. And then in this book, I actually highlight several points. So one is that I see, this Bactria as a region of basically mixture. I talk about the geography, environment, population, and then culture, and their understanding of sovereignty and political structure. And then I bring basically the conquest into this context, try to see that what the Arabs basically achieved in the 100 years when they tried to bring all this, region under their control. And then in this book, basically, I make a detailed discussion that, it was the most difficult part, basically, of the conquest. If you look at it as a whole, the conquest of Iran was not that difficult in the western part, but it was very, very difficult and challenging in the eastern part. And the Arabs never could basically, bring the entire region under control. So in a way, the book basically tries to show that there was a political structure in this region, a multilingual, multicultural region. And then when the Arabs basically come in, so they first adopt this region, adopt this tradition was already there, the structure was already there, they follow it. But then after some time, they go against it to break it down. But then later they realize that they cannot do it. So what they do, they allow the continuation of the same system. So basically, this is, what I'm trying to show in this book, which is very different from what we usually hear about the Arab conquest. And I'm really, in a way, thankful to the scholars already, studied partly this region, particularly Parvaneh, who is with us today, because, it's like the only scholar I can see that actually went against the crown, against the wave, and say that the Arab conquest was not like a pre-planned things, and was basically, the local authorities, the local rulers, they played a very important role. And I guess, that this is the book is basically highlighting that issue even further. So to show that the complexes was not, the way we understood for a long time, but it's very basically very, complex issue. So this is basically, these will, these are the points I just, briefly said. They will be in the book. And I hope that once the book is out, then I look forward to many questions and comments, people will actually ask me about it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Reza, for why does this not work? I need to go backward, and that okay now. Yeah, and you've mentioned, I think, quite a lot of the points that will come up again and again in our discussions. So as you saw from the title, we will talk about basically three different studies, or our own research, all bundled together here. And we've tried to make it a little bit clearer for you in getting colors for each of us. So I'm green. I will be talking about this region, sort of Western Iran. Reza is blue. He will be talking about the region around Balkh. And Arezou is red, and she will be talking about this larger region, but also around Bamiyan. So Teresa green, Reza blue, Arezou red. And with that, I will start and go back to our 4 discussion points: documentary perspectives, negotiating authority, kinship and social actors, and uneven legacies. Now, as Parvane knows, I have a long-standing interest in coinage and as material and documentary evidence for the early history of the Middle East in the Islamic period. As Parvane knows, I'm saying because this is where we first met at the American Numismatic Society many years ago. I'm also very fascinated by the Kharajites, the Khawarij, as a supposedly marginal, yet in lots of ways quite central movement in the first 2 centuries of Islam. We recently held a really good workshop in Hamburg to discuss who the Kharajites really were. There are all these different groups that are called Khariji in the sources that seem to be quite distinct from each other. So who are they really? Is there anything that we can say about them in common? And the main issue is, of course, that we have no direct sources on the Kharajites except their coins. So the documentary perspective is quite important for this period. I'm showing you here a coin of my favorite Khariji rebel in quotation marks, Qatari ibn al-Fujjar. He's one of the leaders of the so-called Azadika, who, according to the heresiographers, is the most extremist of the early Khariji groupings. I think his coins and his rebellion in general is an excellent example for thinking about the complexities and really also our common approach to studying early Islamic history. Now, I studied Qatari as part of the Gerda Henkel Fellowship on extremism in early Islam. The project was set out to integrate literary and material evidence on the Kharajites for the first 2 centuries. In the case of Qatari, it brings together different genres of evidence: heresiography, poetry, historiography, and of course, numismatics, to ask how we can approach Khariji extremist movements beyond the polemical typologies that dominate the traditional narratives. My argument is that Qatari and his followers were not political outliers, but participants in a broader conversation about legitimate authority in the late 7th century. Their movement was a combined militancy with administrative realism and a striking coherent program, which is reflected in his coins or in the coin issues of the Kharajites. In the heresiographical sources, which is really the narrative usually reproduced by about the Kharijis, Qatari appears as the archetypal extremist. The Azadika are implacable. The Azadika's implacable leader, who declared all non-Kharijis as apostates, legitimized violence against women and children, and denied qu'ud, the sitting out of battle. In the historical accounts, such as Tabari or Ibn al-Mubarad, there's a wide range of sources where he appears. These not only preserve a contradictory episodes, as all these accounts do, and timelines, but also really competing dynamics. On the one hand, there is clear hostility. Qatari and the Azadika are fanatical and destabilizing. On the other hand, there is an underlying admiration. Qatari emerges as a charismatic leader, repeatedly outmaneuvering his opponents. He's also a respected poet. His poetry indeed became quite famous and plays an important part in the Khariji legacy, as we will see later on. What is particularly interesting, however, is the numismatic evidence. And here I'm just showing you one coin, but this is really where you see all that I want to highlight. There are coins, several coins attributed to him between 69 and 77 Hijri from Fars and Kirman, several mints. Qatari's coins are in the so-called Arab Sasanian style. The obverse is in the so-called bust of Khusro. The reverse is here, in this case, a Zoroastrian fire altar with attendants. So these are deeply conservative issues, visually continuous with local monetary traditions, as other scholars such as Adam Geiser have already highlighted. They bear bilingual inscriptions in Middle Persian and in Arabic. And again, this is also not unusual, but it's also particular in this case. And I want to draw your attention here to the three things that I've highlighted in yellow. We have, on the one hand, in the central field of the obverse, we have the name of Qatari, and then we have this very interesting inscription, Abdullah Kitri Amiri Onur Shivan, or Bir Noshnigan. Reza told me the other day how to pronounce it properly. The interesting thing about this is that it is a translation into Middle Persian of Commander of the Faithful, the Amir al-Mu'minin. So semantically, it means basically those of the faith, but it's really a translation into Middle Persian of this, and the creation of a new term of this very important, of course, Islamic title for the commander, for the leader of the Muslim community. In Arabic, you have in the margin, again, also of the obverse, you see the Arabic inscription here. Sorry, I can show you, of course. La hukma illa lillah, which is the one of the first attestations of a Quranic citation on a coin. And it's, of course, the Khariji motto, so to speak, there is no judgment except God's. Now, the Umayyads' almost immediate adoption of other Quranic citations on their own coinage in the 70s Hijri suggests that they were directly responding to these rebel interventions. And we have, I should say, in Fars and Kirman, almost at the same time as we have Qatari's coins, we also have Umayyad and also Zubayrid issues even. Now, what is so interesting about this is as I already mentioned, this Amir al-Mu'minin, the claim to the caliphate, a very clear claim to the caliphate. So Qatari really, together with Abd al-Malik and Ibn al-Zubair in the Second Civil War, was the third contender for leadership to the community. So he very actively was part of this conversation around legitimate authority. Now, the last thing I want to highlight here is the date, and this is also something really quite interesting. On the Khariji coins, the dating on these coins, as Paravane well knows, is extremely complicated, and you have different kinds of dating systems. Yazdagird, post-Yazdagird, Hijri, different kinds of things. But the Khariji coins are always Hijri dates. So there's something really quite, and this is of course what also eventually becomes adopted on all coins. But there's already something really quite a path forming about this, about these movements, about these ideas that they put forward on, these on this very small documentary, of course, sources, but I think with a very high sense of choice. This is also maybe an important point. So just to summarize, I think that if we look beyond the hagiographical caricature of Qatari, he emerges as a pragmatic and articulate actor who challenges the Umayyads and also the Zubayrids ideologically, fiscally, theologically, all at once. His coins, bilingual, are conservative in design and yet quite radical in the inscriptions. They embody the complex entanglement of continuity and descent that makes the early Islamic period so difficult and also so rewarding to study. Now, there's of course lots more to say about this, but I just want to show you one other thing that has totally taken my fascination in recent years, in the recent 2 years. I've got a blog also on the Islamicate East side about this, namely tombstones, which is another, I think, really, for our documentary perspective, another really not very integrated source base. I think a fantastic and much neglected source base for a really bottom-up perspective on the early centuries of Islamic rule. And again, they say a lot about negotiating authority, about religious and political. And they're also really an untapped treasure for insights on kinship and social actors in the early Islamic period. I'll say a little bit more about them later. And with that, I will hand over to Reza.
Thank you, Teresa. So as we just mentioned about, this basically the documentary sources, many of you may have been aware of the existence of the Bactrian documents, and their importance for the studying an Islamic period in the East, and also, what's happening basically earlier. So what I'm going to actually do here, giving a little bit, information about the Bactrian documents, because there are basically much more, say, detailed information already published by Professor Nicholas Sims Williams, so you can actually see, the documents over there. But then here a little bit, information about it, and actually which help us for the next slides, that we can understand about the negotiation authority and the kinship and other issues. Already mentioned by Teresa. So the Bactrian documents, basically, when we look at them, they come from the northern part of the Hindu Kush. So if you can see, I put basically with the brown, and then the brown marks looks like the scroll. Basically, they show that where they come from. They are all coming from the northern part of the Hindu Kush, now in Afghanistan, situated in Afghanistan. And so basically, what they show is that they are, coming from, say, from the region, like here is basically, I'm sorry, I didn't put the name here. It's like this region is basically Badakhshan, and then here is basically Herat down there. So it's basically between, say, Faryab all the way to Badakhshan, and from Bamiyan all the way to north. So basically to the Amudarya is the geography of the Bactrian documents. Many documents were found from this region since 1990s. And then they are kept in different museums and private collections. Many of them are in the Khalili collections in London, and some are in Japan and America and London and different places, basically. As I said, all these documents are already translated and published by Professor Sims Williams, that you can actually see the details about them. But then it's important also to see that the actual provenance of these documents are not known, basically. So we don't know where exactly they were found. But then from the documents themselves, we can understand where they were produced or circulated. And then these documents basically refer to many names. So they basically talk a lot about Rob, Mal, and Samangan, these areas. They talk about, Gaz and Beer, the areas in Guzgan, and then Kalf, and also Varnu in this part. So basically, they talk a lot about, many places that even we don't know where they actually, located exactly. But then we can clearly see that, they actually, say, occupy a large geographical space in the northern part of today's Afghanistan. And if you go to the next slide, so I can tell that these documents actually tell us a lot about the four, say, kingdoms existed in this region. So if you put them, together, they show that they were basically produced in the kingdom of Guzgan, in an area called Gaz, and then an area called the kingdom of Rob, and then also the kingdom of Kyrgyzstan, and an area which we noted as domain of Yabgu of Tukharistan. So basically, they come from these areas. And then overall, there are 168 documents. Oh, no, to go back to that, please. Yeah. So overall, 168 documents, coming from this region. And as I said, they're all, translated by Nicholas Sims Williams in 3 volumes, and several articles that you can all see them for more details. Can you go to the next one, please? So these basically the documents are not only confined to the northern part of the Hindu Kush. Some Bactrian documents were found near Bamiyan in Khesh particularly, and then some were found also in the southern part of the Hindu Kush from the Khost region. The document from Khesh is also published, but then those from the southern part of Afghanistan, some of them are published and some of them are not yet published because they are not in a good situation, and so to basically to be read and published. When we talk about these documents, when we talk about Bactrian, we should know that this is the name, is a conventional name we give actually to this language. It's never called Bactrian language. It's originally called Arya. And then you can see it basically in an inscription comes from Rabatak near Samangan. The inscription is basically referring to a temple commissioned by the great Kanishka, the king of the Kushans. So it's talking about basically Arya as the original language, but this language was a spoken language in this region. And then it was basically written later by adopting the Greek cursive script. So, I mean, then why we call it now Bactrian, because basically all these documents, coming from the northern part of Afghanistan, northern part of the Hindu Kush, which actually comprise with the historical, Bactria that we know from the sources. So, and also when we look at these documents, basically come from northern part of Afghanistan, the central, and also the south, and also there are inscriptions in the north of the Amudarya even, we can think that this language was the administrative language, and in a way was a kind of lingua franca that many people actually communicated in this language. So the subjects of these letters, these documents are different. Basically, there are letters, private letters, administrative letters. Go back to that. Go back, please. The private and administrative letters. And then there are basically economic documents, there are legal documents, and then there are list of expenditures and receipts. So these basically the documents, as I put, two slides here. So they were the letters would look like this basically once what was folded, and when you open it, you can see basically the whole text. So it was written, on both sides of the the parchment. The legal document and the economic contract, they are all written in a double document form. So basically the same text, you can see it's written twice, and then the upper part of it was rolled and sealed basically by the clay sealing, and you can see here, and the lower part of it was just left open for reading, and then the upper part, which was the closed part, were always kept, closed, and it was opened only in the court of law before a judge, basically. So that's quite, important to know about this. And then also there are specific issues about these documents. So one is that the majority of these documents we have, basically out of 168 from Bactria, many of them are in complete form. So we really can see, what's going on in terms of deals. And then they also, the legal documents, all of them opened with date and the place of commission. So where this basically deal was done, and then who were there. So they basically give detailed information about the different parties, and also they give us detailed information about the background of the issue. So we can really understand, what was going on there. And also, so basically this is an advantage of these, say, documents. But then as these documents have, advantage, like all other documents, they also have disadvantages. And the main disadvantage is that they do not cover the entire region of Bactria. And then other issue is that some of them are in fragmented shapes that we cannot understand the entire, the document. But then they are very important because they basically cover a long time period. So from early 4th century, from 332 to 772, is like basically 8 centuries, a long time span. And these are actually corresponding to the period of the Huseini, the Haftalites, the Turks, the Umayyads, and the early Abbasids. So we really can see, the continuation of administration and then governance in this region. And these are quite important because they can tell us about the society, the, familial issues, the inheritance, legal system, social justice, and then they can tell us a lot about, social structure and political structure, more importantly. So this basically, it's very important when it comes particularly to the issue of the conquest and understanding how Islamicization basically happened in this region. So these are quite important documents. And then there are some Arabic documents basically found in the from the northern part of the Hindu Kush. We exactly don't know where they are found because the provenance are not known. But then some of these documents, basically there are 32 documents, very small number, but very important in terms of contents. They are all written on parchment. But then the important thing is that some of these documents, are basically issued for the same people who are mentioned in some of the Bactrian documents. And then one of these families is Mir ibn Bek, who's known basically from both Arabic and the Bactrian documents. But then the Arabic documents, unlike the Bactrian documents, they are short, and then less information, and sometimes it's very difficult to understand the background of this, documents. But then still, it's quite important when it comes to the issue of Islamicization and understanding social changes in this region. So if you can go to the next one. So it's like a little bit basically about this negotiation authority. as we just said, these documents are very important to understand the social changes. So one example I can bring, from this document, they have actually one Bactrian and then two Arabic documents that I want to say, briefly here. So we can see that this document actually talks about slavery. So this is a Manemesian document related to a person called Zer, and then this basically comes from this family of the Bactrian documents, and it shows, that an individual, his name is Zer, he actually paid the money to his owner. He was a slave. He paid basically his full price, and then he obtained his freedom, and then he basically got this document from the court of law. And then it's also important to see that this document basically shows that slavery was already in Bactria. I published about it already and discussed a lot about it, that the slavery was already there, and then the Bactrian understood the slaves in two ways. One was basically the slave was bought from the market. It's called drachm khirsik. And then another type was basically a slave was born in the family of a slave, or the parents were already a slave, and that is called khub najadak morik. So these are the two types of slaves were there, but slaves were actually had this right to buy their freedom. Although the slavery in Bactrian, documents is like a little bit, contents, because it shows, that the owners had all authorities over their slaves. They actually looked at them as a kind of economic, source. So even if you look at this area that I put it basically in an orange, a little a circle here, it actually talks about this document as molrak, and then this is basically a term used mostly in economic documents. So it's like land and other stuff. So it's basically like sold as a kind of property, and slaves are basically understood as a kind of personal property, and then the owners could do anything they wanted to do. So but then it's quite interesting that this shows that the Bactrian legal system allowed the slavery, but the slave could buy their freedom. But that should have been paid, and then that should have been basically done in the court of law. If you go to the next slide, we have basically several Arabic documents from this region. These two are very interesting because it also related to this one is basically a part of a Manemesian document, or mukataba in Arabic, and this one is basically a document of emancipation document, or etq. Really, both of them are related to a slave. So in this one, it's basically is part of another document. So there are basically two documents issued on the same in the name of the same person called Qiya al-Ha'iq, or the weaver. So it's a person called Qiya. We don't know. This is not a Bactrian name. Basically, it's probably a Turkish name, as Jeffrey Khan says, but then we don't know how this person basically ended up in Bactria. But what is important to know about this document is that this document shows that Islam also allowed the slavery here. They had this kind of slavery in this region, but this document shows that Qiya was basically allowed to buy his freedom. And then this document basically says that Qiya was a slave belonging to Buya bin Muhammad, and he negotiated with Buya bin Muhammad, and he was supposed to buy his freedom by paying 30 dirhams in advance and 100 dirhams in 1 year time. But then this document basically shows that this was basically, Qiya paid the money less than what it was supposed to pay, and then it's later than what the time was given to him. So it basically shows, that it was not as restricted as the Bactrian, ideas about the slavery. So slaves basically had more options, to deal with this issue. And also, unlike the document we saw in about Zer, that Zer was basically a legal party, but he was not allowed to witness the document he received, or seal it. But then Qiya here is a slave, but in Islamic basically system, in Islamic regulation, he was allowed to be a witness, a legal party, a witness to his own document, and also seal it. And then you can see the other part of it basically talks about, it puts the name of Qiya as one of the shuhud, or the witnesses, which was not, allowed in the Bactrian legal system. So this is quite interesting to see that, both Islamic and Bactrian legal system allowed the slavery, but, the Islamic basically regulation offered more, more things, to the slaves compared to the Bactrian one. And then also, this is an Arabic document of etq, or emancipation, issued by a person. His name is Al-Harb bin Malik. Hazar kitab, can see etq, Al-Harb bin Malik. And is issued for a woman named Nufah Abdullah and her children. And it's quite important is that basically one person issuing emancipation letter for a woman and her children and freedom for the sake of God. And then this basically document has a formula, Arabic formula called, I mean, as you can see it here, اعتقهم لوجه الله ليس لأحد عليهم سبيلا. So it's basically, it says that I emancipated them for the sake of God. So I mean, if you put this, I mean, three documents together, what we can see is that, in this region, when Islam comes in, slavery was already there. People could buy their, I mean, basically, say freedom, but they had to pay at once the whole price, no negotiation, but and then get the document at the court of law. But when Islam comes, Islamic regulation basically allows, I mean, the slave buys the freedom, then they negotiate for, I mean, basically his freedom, and also bring something new, and that is freeing or releasing the slaves for the sake of God. And that is quite, I mean, interesting. But then at the same time, because Islamic regulation and Bactrian regulation, I mean, going together, coexisted in this region, and people had basically choice, I mean, to choose sometimes, you can see that they're basically, what they do, they impacted each other. And then, although this is in Arabic, is following the Islamic, I mean, say, legal regulation, it has a bula here. You can see this is a clay basically sealing here, and then is signed with little, I mean, finger print. And this is basically this fingernail print is not an Islamic, not an Arabic, say, tradition. It's basically a Bactrian tradition. We have it already from the Bactrian documents, and it shows that, how when Islam and basically say, as enters this region, the Arabs settle in this region and they become part of this society. They give, what they have, and they get, what was already existed. So this is basically what I wanted to say. So Teresa, can I go to the next slide, or shall I wait for the later one? Oh, and then, so if I continue here, so about this coexistence is quite important, because this, I mean, documents tell us exactly how, the two say societies basically deal with each other, and then what they learned from each other. And then this is also quite important, these two documents. So one document is the Arabic one, is basically is a tax receipt, is issued in the name of a person called Mir bin Bek, Mir son of Bek. And then this is issued basically by an Arab man. His name is Bishr bin Umar. And it's like basically given to Mir. But it's quite interesting, in the same year, so 771 and 2, you can see there is another Bactrian document is issued in the name of Mir ibn Bek. So you can see here basically I highlighted in yellow, so Mir Bakpur. So it actually says that this document is issued for Mir, because Mir went to meet the Turkic king Karatunga Aspara, basically from the Turkic family who ruled Kyrgyzstan, not in Rob, but in Kyrgyzstan. A region basically in the neighboring hood of Rob. And then this document says that Karatunga listened to the petition presented by Mir, and then he realized that this is basically lawful and should be adjusted. So in a way, he orders that this protection document should be given to him to protect Mir's family, properties, and then wants anyone to make any dispute with Mir. So it's quite interesting, because, I mean, it shows that Mir, as one individual from Rob, so this basically, he paid his land tax to an Arab authority in Rob, where he was basically living. But then for an issue related to the family and legal system, he does not go to the Arab. He goes to a Bactrian authority. It was a Turkic basically authority who understand the Bactrian legal system, and obtains a protection letter that is written in Bactrian, is according to the Bactrian law. But then it's quite interesting to see that while Mir had this choice to basically choose between the two authority, these two documents, I mean, have something is in common. And the interesting thing is that the Arabic letter has Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim at the top. This is like the Bismillah formula as we have. But then the Bactrian document here also unusually starts with a Bactrian formula equal to the Arabic Bismillah. This basically here, Pidnam Izada, so is in the name of God, and this is like an adoption of basically Arabic say formula. And this is not only confined to Bactrian, we can also see it in Sogdian and the Middle Persian, I mean, documents we have from earlier and later period. So I mean, what is important is that this Mir family that has already basically, there's some publication about it. Arezou has written already about it. I published, I mean, about this family. That it's quite interesting that this family basically living in Bactria, where is a multilingual, multicultural. So you have the Arab authority, the local Bactrian authority, and these people had choice. So they were not obliged to follow one specific, say, legal tradition. So they could actually go to different, system and then to solve their problems. And then this is basically because they have, this multilingual and cultural and multi systems and in this region. And then they could go. And then Mir has also a daughter, and that's quite interesting, and a brother that his brother basically Kamifat, who chose, to go to basically a Muslim, an Arab Muslim man to solve his problem. But then Mir's daughter Hamra chooses, also to go to a Muslim basically authority to solve her problem related to her dowry. But then Mir himself goes to a Turkic one. So basically, it's the family with different members. When Islam comes in, one of them, convert, and then they choose where to go and do this. So that they had this kind of, option to negotiate and where to go to find. And this is quite, interesting when it happens to the East. And these documents are also important to understand the society, particularly when it comes, to family. And then what basically family is. And then in the Bactrian documents, family is not a nuclear basically family, like parents and children only, but they are a kind of household. So it's like parents, grandparents, children, and then the brides, and then also the slaves, and their children, they're all living basically in the same space in a way. And then the Bactrian documents, they talk about the family in a way that we can understand that this is very similar to, what we have, what we understand as a kind of, Iranian family, which, we know from the Western part of basically Iran. So like them, here they basically, talk about the, family as the basic unit of the society. So they have the term Khan, Khana, or Kadak, basically cat, for the family. And then, and then they show how basically this family is also the main mark of social identity. So, the family is very important because, the Bactrian documents here, they do not talk when it comes basically to identify a person, like his social identity, they do not talk about his color, his physical shape, his eye or hair or whatever, but they actually always see that where he was basically, which family he belongs to, which region he lives in, and which authority he serves. So these are, say the three issues that usually count as marks of social identity in the Bactrian documents. And the Bactrian documents also show clearly, what is the structure, in the society. So it shows the family and, the extended family base, and then, the clan, made out of, say, these families. And then these familial issues, very important, particularly when it comes to kind of negotiation, when at the times of need. And then this letter, I put the picture here, is basically written by a person. His name is Khol Aramigan to Nawaz Khargan. And then he basically refers to him as a lord, and he explains, that their families and extended families, they are part of the same clan, they have this relationship. And then once, highlight this relationship, it says that, oh, now I have a problem. And the problem is that basically I had a concubine, and the concubine was basically he, or maybe it was taken by the lord, local lord, and now he wants her back. So in this letter, Khol Aramigan says, because we have this familiar relation, familiar, connection, I want you either, to bring this concubine back to me, or send me a mule, and then I can somebody, to basically bring her back home. So it's like, in a way, these documents, as just like, basically as I said, and then there are other documents as well that they show, these familial ties are very important when it comes to solve the problems. Apart from other, mechanisms, there are other mechanisms. Basically, people use it, but these familial, issues are important. And then also, I should say that this type of or this kind of information about the family, the society, how they deal together, they are not coming from other sources. So these Bactrian documents are really unique, that they can tell us, what the Bactrian society is about. So these are something, I wanted to say, and then we can continue more about this later in that part.
Thanks so much, Reza. Clearly, lots of really fascinating things to be gathered from this material and from your document. So, Arezou, you will talk about documents as well.
Yes. Well, thank you for hanging in there to our listeners. I'm sorry it's an hour in. I will try to keep it as interesting as I can, and keep you engaged on the topic. So I stay in the same region as Reza. As he mentioned, Bamiyan is at the sort of southeastern edge of the region that he was talking about. And Bamiyan is central to the region I'm going to talk about for much, and then extending eastwards from there. So next slide, please. I'm going to briefly introduce you to the Bamiyan Papers for those who are less familiar with them. They're also known as the Afghan Geniza, and they became widely known only in 2013 after a controversial purchase of 29 documents by the National Library of Israel, which came or was somehow believed to be connected to Bamiyan. And that was then subsequently followed by another purchase which altogether make up 222 documents in the National Library of Israel since 2016. And the National Library quickly digitized them so that we could work with them in the Invisible East program, which was set up in 2019-2020. However, in our research, we understood that this was not the first time medieval documents had come out of Bamiyan. There were articles that were largely forgotten in the 1940s by the well-known Iranian scholar or Iranistic scholar Vladimir Minorsky, and then one by Gian Roberto Scarcia, one document, which was then also read by an Afghan colleague whose name now escapes me, but it will come to me. Anyway, the set I have summarized for you here includes administrative documents of different types: receipts, orders, promissory notes, internal memos between state officials. It includes legal documents, mostly in the Iqrar format. I will talk about that in a second. It includes many inventories and lists, and also letters, complaints, petitions, and on top of that, more notes and personal commercial notes as well. And the earliest document in the set dates from around the year 1000, and the last one dates from the year 1221, which is the year in which Chinggis Khan personally came into Bamiyan and very famously trashed it very badly. And in this case, he did do the job well, because it was a revenge act for the killing of his grandson in Bamiyan. So we began, next slide, please, publishing them. Initially digitally, so you can consult them in our Invisible East digital corpus, which incidentally also includes all the documents that Reza was talking about, the Bactrian documents in Arabic and in Bactrian, and it also includes many others. But today I'm going to focus on the Bamiyan papers, and notably those that we then came to identify as belonging to one particular archive. Next slide, please. And this archive starts in the year 1155 and ends in the year 1221. And within it, we were able to identify place names, which many of which belong to very small places. Several dozen of them are still in use. Many others are no longer in use, but we were able to identify from historical texts. And you can see that the places are located. So they start from Bamiyan. The Bactrian documents that Reza spoke about don't go this far east. So then from there, they go largely east, and they run along three valleys: the Bamiyan Valley, then the Ghorban Valley, up to the Panjshir Valley, and then we get pretty close to the modern-day Pakistan border at the Indus Valley. Next slide, please.
Right.
Right. So as we are all talking about the value of documents for understanding the history of this region, in Bamiyan, and it is a very striking value because the historiography and the focus of scholars, especially in the West, has been largely on the Buddhist history of Bamiyan. You will all have heard about the famous Bamiyan Buddhas, the largest Buddhas ever to have been built in their time. These date from probably around the 5th century. That's what the latest carbon dating has shown. And of course, fascinating. Many other beautiful and important Buddhist statues and structures and stupas, all scattered all in the area. All very important, but it's really dominated the scholarship. So these documents are filling an important gap. Next slide, please. So like with the Bactrian documents, the Bamiyan papers have no provenance. We don't know, they don't have a stratigraphy. We don't know where they came from exactly, although I have a very strong suspicion that they came from Shahr-e-Ghulghula area, which was the medieval citadel, from which the sultans who were ruling at the time of these documents, who were the Ghurids, followed by the Kharazm Shahs, so the 70 years before the Mongols came in, that they were found there in the early 1930s when the French did their first prospecting. The French archaeologists have been in Afghanistan for over 100 years with some breaks because of the security situation. But this is recorded in Persian, Ariana articles, a very important journal in Afghanistan for history and archaeology, which I discuss in detail in the book, which was mentioned earlier. So we needed to confirm that these were indeed from Bamiyan, and we were able to, from internal evidence, identify that they were from Bamiyan, that the language very much matches the formulae that are spelled out in medieval manuals on how to write administrative documents, how to write letters. So that was a tick. But then we wanted to be doubly sure, and we studied the materiality of the actual paper on which they were written. So these were all written on paper, and we were able to carry out through colleagues in Jerusalem microscopic analysis, macroscopic analysis, which means the study of laid lines and so on, the color, studying the color and so on of the paper, as well as carbon dating here in the Oxford radiocarbon dating laboratory. And we were very happy to learn that the dating of the paper matches the dates that are actually written on the documents by a few decades, which is normal. The paper was produced obviously before the writing. And we were also able to identify the fibers, which are all hemp fibers. And hemp is used in this region. And so it probably means that the paper was produced either in this very Bactria-Bamiyan axis region or possibly Samarkand, but definitely in the Aral Basin and not in China or in Abbasid or former Abbasid regions of Iraq. Next slide, please. So why this title of our, a final point on provenance. It is a big issue and we can talk about it in the Q&A if people want to, but what we, through our digital corpus, at least try to do is to bring this heritage back to Afghan communities and Persian-speaking communities through our digital corpus, which now also has a Persian language interface. It's not ideal, of course, but it's a small contribution we make. Next slide, please. So why, next slide, please. Why this title of Warehouse of Bamiyan? So what we were able to identify and mention was that this belonged to an archive, specifically to an archive belonging to a warehouse manager. Next slide, please. Whose name is Akbar. Sorry, no, we're not there yet. Sorry. Whose name is Abu Bakr ibn Omar. If you could go back, please, Teresa. And then he is followed by who he believed to be his son, Ali bin Abu Bakr. And there are other key agents who appear in these documents who we were all able to link back to the warehouse, including the financial department to which the warehouse manager reported, of a sort of a ministerial office of the Ghurid and then Kharazm-Shahi state, Shehna police officers who received direct orders from the warehouse manager to collect taxes. So this warehouse was collecting grains as tax. As well as many, many landlords and peasants. And the story of the peasants is very interesting because we might imagine them peasants as being sort of voiceless, weak, poor farmers who are just slaving away for the good of the landlord. No, that's not what the record shows. These were people who used documents to voice concerns, to make complaints, to fight for their rights, and so on. So next slide, please. So I thought I would now show you how the documents show us about various negotiations. This set of documents very much echoes what Reza was talking about, and also Teresa. So here you have what are essentially the very earliest Persian legal documents in New Persian, written in New Persian. And what is interesting is, I'm going to cut it short because our time is short, is that Arabic legal language is retained in these documents because the Arabic clearly has legal force. And so you cannot translate things like, next slide, please, terms that relate to the sound. It's a very common, Teresa, next slide, please. Yeah, it's a very common phrase that also appears in Cairo, Geniza. So documents from the same period in Egypt, 11th, 12th century, the sound that the person. So in an Iqrar document, it's usually written in the first person, and it's a person who is liable to do something. So usually it's to pay back a debt, or to purchase a house, and then this sort of completes or acknowledges that the person who has sold his house no longer can exercise any rights on the house, and so on. So this kind of language on the person being of sound mind and body, that he's acting legally, willingly, not coerced, forced, or constrained, nor ignorant of what he has acknowledged. All this language you find in Arabic documents as well. So it shows where you have clearly the local population is Persian speaking, and so they need to understand these documents, but Arabic language is still retained. Next slide, please. So the coherence you find with not only Arabic fiqh manuals that were produced in the 11th, 12th century, but also Persian ones that haven't been studied much at all by scholars of fiqh, which are really fascinating, and I won't have time to go into right now. Next slide, please. I also just wanted to show you this slide, which I think Lorenzo Bondioli is still on the call, which Lorenzo, who is a Cairo Geniza scholar.
Yes, here I am.
Yeah, you're there. Sat in a conference with me in Oxford, and I showed him the document on the left, which is a tax receipt from the Bamiyan corpus, and jumped up and quickly showed me a tax receipt from Egypt. And I think it's you can see the uncanny resemblance in format. I'll just highlight one or two small bits. I think, Teresa, I have an animation. Yeah, so this is, for example, one of them where you it concerns an amount of wheat in Bamiyan. In the case of the left-hand side, when you can see gandum in the middle somewhere towards the left, and then underneath the word gandum is the word hashed, and then followed by man. So 8 man. Man is a measure of weight, where 1 man is 100 man. Sorry, is 0.8 no. Sorry. Yes, 100 man is 0.8 kilos. 1 man is 0.8 kilos, sorry. So 1 man is 0.8 kilos. So this concerns about 6.5 kilos of wheat. And then on the right of it, with the line over where the red arrow is pointing, it says Chahorman, half of which. The line over means half of which. So it's a very common convention of tansif, so the half amount, which is supposed to avoid falsification and so on. And you have exactly the same in the Arabic one on the right. And then you have accountant ciphers here, which you could read, possibly some people suggest is an elongated form of the word saha, which means that it has been checked against the ledger. So just to show you that you have this very close relation between these documentary cultures. Next slide, please. So what do these documents show us about? Oh, here's the book, which is coming out next month. You can scan the QR code, and you can also punch in event 30 for a 30% discount. So what this book shows us about the age. No, you can stay there, Teresa, where you were. About the agency of peasants and farmers is, I will quickly summarize for you. We have letters of complaint written by farmers, including women farmers, to their landlords whenever the landlords are not following proper procedure. So we have a case where a foreman shows up and calculates how much a tax is to be taken depending on what the harvest is at the threshing floor. And the procedure, the bright protocol, is to make sure that the farmers are present when the foreman does the calculation. But the letter complains that the foreman did it in their absence. The letter also complains that the foreman paid them less than what was agreed for their pomegranates. And the letter concludes, and this is coming from the Jama'at, from the people of the village, concludes that you will send us a new foreman and we will have a say in your selection of the new foreman. We have another letter where peasants are unhappy, and they're the lowest of the peasants. They are the gleaners. So they're the people who come after the harvest and collect the husk and all that. They've been accused clearly of stealing something, probably some of the wheat or I don't know what. And the leader of this group of gleaners says that we actually hid behind a rock and one night, and we saw how your people came and stole. So if you're going to accuse us again, we're going to leave because we have plenty of other places to go, and you're basically going to be in trouble because your harvest is going to rot and you're not going to have people to work. So we have a letter by a female farmer who complains that her plot has been cut in half and that it's unfair because she's been keeping it fertile and keeping it, fertile, productive. She's been doing what she's meant to do. And she doesn't write in her name. The letter is written by a scribe, a male scribe, in her name. But it shows that she knew how to get the word across, how to hire a scribe, how to send a letter, pay the scribe. So again, you get a very good sense of this kind of negotiation of authority between people across all social strata. So the documents nuance paradigms of Oriental despotism, which I know have been overhauled in many circles, but still pops up in a lot of scholarly works. And it's much more reminiscent of James Scott, for example, who talks about the weapons of the weak and how people like peasants in our documents, they don't necessarily resort to outright rebellion as a first course of action, but resort to these lower grade ways of resistance or of making sure that they get what they consider to be their right. The documents also nuance paradigms of state centrism. So authority on the ground often came not from state actors, but also from non-state actors. And they also nuance paradigms of this center-periphery, supposed center-periphery dichotomy. And what you actually get is a much more horizontal exchange, and you don't really get trickle-down governance. We have to bear in mind that, and there's a wonderful quote by, I don't know if it's authentic because it's amongst Rashiduddin's letters, which some people say were written actually at a later time, but either doesn't matter actually, because what this letter says is supposedly Rashiduddin guiding his son, who is then the governor of Bam in Iran, not Bamiyan, saying, remember that the real exchequers of the treasury are the ra'iyat and the peasants. Without the peasants, we don't have food, we don't have money, we don't have income. So these are agricultural societies, and agriculture is the mainstay of the economy. It also, I think, nuances this over focus or over reliance in the scholarship on Silk Road trades and the end of the Silk Road trade. The Silk Road trade was a luxury trade, which probably accounted for a few percent, maybe 10% tops of economies. So it's really important to bring this kind of these kinds of data into the equation when we talk about economies and authority. It also, I think, nuances our belief, or what I was taught when I was a graduate student, that, the Mongols came and trashed everything in Khorasan. We have no original documents, no original texts. It's simply not tenable anymore. And I think the more you search, the more you find. We're learning this. More and more documents are entering our digital corpus, and we're by no means finished. So life in the countryside is no longer unknowable. The importance of agrarian production, as I mentioned, cannot be overemphasized. And even Stephen Humphreys in 1999 lamented that, because the chronicles discuss rural life and countryside life, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be talking about it. And certainly this documentary record fills the gap. And I think a final point I want to make on the paradigm shifting here is that a lot of the history it's not like no one's written about rural administration or the history of the countryside of Khorasan. Anne Lambton notably has written some important, very important, really guiding books that I couldn't live without. But she draws her data from, first of all, not from what's Afghanistan, but what's Iran today. So it's Qom, it's Fars, and so on, which has a totally different ecology. It has a totally different demographic to the Hindu Kush region. But she also didn't have original documents to hand. The closest thing she had were compilations of model letters, which are good, but they're not the same as the original document. Next slide, please. I've summarized this. We can move on to the next slide and the next slide. Okay, so very briefly, because we said we would talk about kinship and social actors, I'm going to come back to the documents for a second, and I'll try to wrap this up quickly. But this is a woman who is mentioned in the Fazail Bar, so I'm going back to my old research, but I haven't really spoken about how when I discovered her biography, which was embedded within her husband's biography, that one of 70 that make up the Fazail Bar. And I started to read what it said about her, and I started to connect her to other people, other of the 70 people who were highlighted in the Fazail Bar. Next slide, please. I started to see that she belongs to actually a whole group, which I call the house, a family group, which I call the House of Homran. Homran was her great-grandfather. And we have coins still minted in his name. He was an Umayyad military official. And I just wanted to bring this in because Reza was saying how when he goes to meetings, he finds that scholarly meetings with colleagues who work on the Islamic West, he finds that people seem to assume that in Khorasan we didn't have important families. So here's one that hasn't been very well known. Next slide, please. Also in the documents. So this is actually not from Bamiyan, but this is from Bamiyan, sorry, yes. We also have another set of documents that are in our corpus from Firuzkoh, which is slightly west, nearer to Herat in Afghanistan. But this is from Bamiyan. We also have, I mentioned, female farmers, and in this case, again, a very outspoken woman who is no, she's not outspoken, she's powerful because she has borrowed quite a lot of money and she has agreed to paying back on certain terms and so on, which I won't go into now. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can move on to the next slide. Yeah. Now, finally, to the Barmakids, which I only have a couple of minutes for, but I wanted to bring them in. Obviously, they are also originally from Balkh, so we're still in the same region. They, as we all know, I'm not going to talk about their family history as such. We know that they became associates of Umayyad caliphs, and most famous, they become the most powerful and the most famous as viziers of Abbasid caliphs, especially Harun al-Rashid. Next slide, please. So in the 8th century, but I wanted to use this as an excuse really to introduce you to the second book that we're publishing, which is based on a manuscript called Akhbar Barmakian, which is written in Persian, and it really fascinated me because I think I saw Kevin van Bladel was in this call, but obviously Kevin has written important work on the Barmakids, and he has used mostly Arabic texts. And I had always sort of thought that that's all we've got. But then once I started looking at this Persian text on the Barmakids and we started looking for more, we found dozens of them. And this particular text is really fun because it's got stories in it. So the genre is quite different from the ones that we're used to, the Tabaris and so on. But the stories have a huge amount of verisimilitude, a word I learned from my literary colleagues. So you recognize the political historical events, the dates, the people, but it's got lots of really fun dialogue. It's got some fantastical elements in it. And most importantly, it's got a moral message. The author, Ziauddin Barani, is a well-known a courtier in the Delhi Sultanate who wrote chronicles for the sultans. But he wrote this when he had fallen from grace with the sultan. And you can really tell that I think he sees himself as, poor old Jafar Barmaki, who's been sort of shoved aside, and he's basically making a plea to use the Barmakid model and the model of generosity, of gallantry, of, chivalry and all that, to treat people like him better. I think that's basically his main point. He claims that it is translated from an Arabic source, but it's interesting that this Arabic source is not the one that's mentioned by people like Bosworth and others, but a second one. But since looking into this, I've now, through colleagues, found Arabic manuscripts that cite this other Arabic original source from the time of the Barmakids as well. So I do think that there's probably some truth to this stemming from older Arabic manuscripts. Next slide, please. Right, and so I just wanted to show you the stories as they appear in the book. There's not much to say. Next slide, please. And here's the code. So if you'd like to purchase it, you can do same code to use, event 30. And this brings us to the next slide on uneven legacies, and I will kick us off just to make it easier.
And I think Arezou, because we're already quite late in the time, and we want to leave a little bit of time for questions. Maybe we'll skip this and just very briefly summarize, that of course they're very uneven legacies.
Of course, summarize the story.
If you can, colleagues, if you can take 2 minutes each to sum up so that we could open the floor to discussions and questions that colleagues have from you. Yes.
Yes, thanks, Parvane. I think I'll do this for all of us. I'll leave the uneven legacies in case I'll just walk you through some pretty pictures. Stories about the Barmakids, then some fun modern stuff. Red, remember, is Arezou. This is on tombstones. This is on Kharajites and the Taliban, Bactrian society. So just to summarize, that documentary and family history of medieval Islamicate societies is basically a Cairo-Ghanida Western Islamicate story. We hope we have shown that no, there are a variety of documents from the East that can be studied with a diplomatic documentary lens and less known advice literature with a literary source criticism lens. Authorities are a top-down phenomenon, of course, also no. Agency happens along a horizontal plane and at different levels and in different contexts, urban and rural, in different settings we've seen. Then imperial approaches outrank local specificities. No, local kinship and social ties maintain continuum and are the glue that enable the blending of ideas from outside and inside, creating new forms. I think this is something that all three of us really very much try to foreground, this idea of blending of old and new, and something, the local, this very specifically local in all of this, that nonetheless has a connection to much larger conversations, much larger trends and templates also. So I think with that, lost legacies cannot be revived. We didn't get around to studying that, to talking about that now, but again, the answer is no. They can and need to be revived and disseminated in academic and non-academic context. So we hope that we have done that a little bit today on the Kharajites, on the Bactrians, and on the Barmakids. And with that, I'll finish the PowerPoint and open the floor. Thanks very much to all of you for your patience.
Well, please join me in thanking all three speakers. This was a fascinating panel, as I promised everyone. And if there is someone out there who didn't know that we have brought together three very exemplary scholars who offer first-rate research, well, yeah, now you know. So I have questions, of course, but I will leave it to the floor to bring up their questions. Kevin.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for these three very interesting presentations. Teresa, Arezou, Reza, I don't think we've been in person. You all have Rez in your name, don't you? So, Reza, have you seen the new volume of Bactrian documents that came out this year? So if you have, then let me just mention it to the others. There's a fourth volume that came out, not through the same press, but through the Corpus Inscriptionum Iranicarum, and these are Bactrian documents from southern and eastern Afghanistan and from northern Pakistan. So it's pretty exciting. They're on birch bark. They show different dialectal features. Many of you may know this from Professor Sims-Williams himself. But then there's another new discovery. Just a few months ago, well, a few years ago, there's a Russian team that partially deciphered the Kushan script that antedates the use of the Greek script in Bactria. And Professor Sims-Williams a few months ago published an article demonstrating that that script is writing an early version of Bactrian. So we now have a pre-Greek script, Kushan script, the decipherment of which is underway. So very exciting things for the study of Bactrian and of the region. But in particular, the Bactrian Documents 4 volume really very much expands our knowledge of the terrain in which Bactrian was used all the way to Peshawar and maybe beyond. That's all I wanted to say. It's not, I have, of course, lots of questions, but it seemed like something everybody would be excited about.
Yeah, it's super great. Thank you for sharing that.
So I think we're going to go one on the floor and one from the text that we get.
Parvani, you're muted.
Parvana, you muted yourself and
I always do that. So one is from Matin Argandepur. Matin says for Dr. Bernheimer, I was interested in the title of Amire, the believers, Nikan.
Nigan, yeah.
Yeah, Nigan. Could you expand a bit more on this? How significant was the Middle Persian rendition of the title? Then let me just give the three questions for three of you. Dr. Hosseini, I'm interested in how you highlighted the place of slavery and its legal particularities in Bactria. Could I just ask for a quick lookup of any sources on slavery in Bactria before this? And for Dr. Azad, I was also taught in school that the Mongols were responsible for the destruction of all Khorasani documents. Having looked at the documents quite carefully myself, I am familiar with their importance to the history of the region. I just wanted to ask what aspect of the documents stuck out most to you as a historian? So, three questions.
Arezou, do you want to start? Let's start from the back.
from the back. Okay, gosh, but I have to think about that. There's so many things that stuck out to me, but I guess it's what I spoke about. It's that all the way down to the village level, how literate the society was. It doesn't mean that everybody read, but everybody knew about writing and everybody knew about the importance of using documents, how important documents were, how it was all very streamlined and systematized. And then the other thing is what I mentioned also that Lorenzo and I were also discussing, which is how closely they align to one another, so far away from Egypt to Bactria, many sort of 300, 400 years after the end of the Abbasid Caliphate. So I think those were, and then there are lots and lots of, Martin is on my team, so he knows. You should probably answer that question. We've read so many together where you find all kinds of interesting nuggets of information. Like we've also recently translated a glossary in which an Arabic to Persian glossary, which is, you would think it's like, I don't know, words that are very useful. No, they're sort of like 10 variants of a word for the way a pen is cut, or 10 different words for beards, like beards that go up to the top of your cheek, beards that run down to your chin, beards that go, just
what's the word for Reza's beard?
Good question. Maybe Martin remembers. But it's just, how sophisticated and how detailed language was and how much it was used and writing was used. That's what struck me the most.
If I,
Yes.
shall I, answer a little bit. Thank you very much. I guess first is thanks, Kevin, to talk about, the volume basically. Yes, I'm very aware of them when they actually came out, and then, the time when Nicholas was basically translating them. And then, but I didn't actually include them here because, I was talking about a little bit, different from the northern part. So, but I'm very, very much aware of those documents, found from Khost. So the other thing is that as, basically answering to Matin's question, as Arezou said about the importance of these documents, yes, these documents are really important. As Arezou said, the documents they're showing, the way basically administration work and how they are important in the life of people, ordinary people. The Bactrian documents, for example, if I give you some, one example would be like a shock to majority of the scholarship, I guess, is like when they talk basically about the importance of documents, says like it basically even a local lord, like a ruler, could not do something without having a written document. And like some of these Bactrian documents says, for example, this basically king gave me this land, go and get it from this, this person in the village. And then the person who is in the village says that, no, I have to see a document with a double seal from, basically the administration till I give you this land. So I'm not going to give you this land, basically. So this shows, how documentary, system, how document was so, central to this administration, so important, for the life of people. And then the other thing, these documents, clearly show, as Arezou already said about it, is that land basically belongs to household, belongs to individuals later. So kings, does not basically, king or, local ruler here, do not, say, own the lands of the people. So that's quite important. This is completely goes against, all those things, Marx said, and, I mean, we know the roots of it comes from India, basically that kind of thought, and then, say preserved in even modern scholarship. But then, and to answer, what Mateen says about the slavery, yes. We do have a good number of Bactrian documents talking about the slavery. I have already published an article about that. The slavery, I'm represented in Bactrian documents, and also edited a special issue with Jelle Bronning at Leiden, so about the slavery in early Islamic period. So you can see, that we put basically documents, from different regions, from North Africa, from Egypt and Nubia, from basically Iran, even, slavery within the Zoroastrian, I mean, say the Mubad, I mean, families, and then how they would deal. So all the way, I mean, to say today's Afghanistan. So basically we did, yes, there are basically work about it, published work about it. And also I published, basically, there will be an article soon coming up from, again, this Afghanistan, Edinburgh University Press. That's about the social impacts of the conquest. So the social impact of the conquest, I mean, discuss in detail that what happens basically to these institutions. The Bactrian one, in terms of legal regulations, when when Islam comes to it, what they bring and how basically they change. So there are, I mean, works about it that you can, and if you want, I can send you all those, I mean, watch.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's also now a question from Istvan, which sort of goes into the same line, so I'll answer them both together. Yes, I think this translation of Amir al-Mu'minin into Middle Persian is extremely significant, both for what it tells us about Qatari's claims, but also about the audience on the other side, who he was actually speaking to. And is it unexpected for someone who is supposedly considered killing infidel women and children? Illicit, Istvan asks, and yes, but I think this is exactly the point. That what we know about Qatari otherwise is, as I mentioned, from the heresiographies mostly. This is the the narrative that we sort of have to undo. So if we really just look to the contemporaneous material, which is the coinage, we see that there is somebody who's really engaging with the Umayyads, with the Zubayrids, who's really in his own way making a very clear term. And in a number of instances, we see that actually the other factions are following the Kharajites. So this idea that they're really developing a notion of what this new Islamic authority is supposed to be is, I think, extremely interesting, because it makes also the connection to the local communities, the people that they're actually trying to speak to, that they're trying to convert, to convert, maybe not entirely religiously, though probably the Khawarij, but in terms of gaining them for their movement. So it's it's extremely interesting, and I think these sort of things are quite wonderful. Of course, it's a tiny snippet, and a coin is not even a document, and it's a document is not a literary source. So the story that we get is basically the word, but with that word, I think we can actually really do quite a lot.
Okay, yeah, Malik. Yes, I heard you. We have to finish at 2:05, people. So first Lorenzo, and then Alva, please.
Hi, thank you. Fantastic presentations. My question was answered by Reza. I wanted to know about land tenure, who owns the land. But I will just mention that there is another opportunity for cross-Asian comparison that I'm very excited to discuss with Arezou. There is a new text about the fiscal administration of Fatimid and Seljuk Syria, penned by a Fatimid Jewish bureaucrat called Tustari. And it's all about tax collection in a way that is very different from Egypt, and that really surprised me. And now I'm thinking that probably the best comparative materials are actually your Babylonian papers. It is tax collection in kind that is brought to state granaries and apportioned. So I think there is a lot to be that we should discuss in terms of this normative text all the way there from Syria and how things work on the ground. You can show that through your documents. In Khorasan, incredible.
I look forward to it. We will be having our panel in Mesa on Sunday, so maybe
Like
if
sadly without you in person, but
I was going to say maybe we should have a sequel.
yes, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Alva, please. Miss Dr. Vahedi, Ava Vahedi. Okay, Ava is not there.
she was very patient for a long time, so maybe
Yeah. Okay, so Alberto then. Hello, Alberto. Please come in.
Yes. Very quickly, thank you all for this fascinating talk. Just, I might have missed it. I might have missed this detail, but you mentioned the problem of the provenance. However, Arezou talked about where these things were sort of smuggled and whatnot. But Reza, I think I missed for your documents, where were they found? How do we get to have them? I think I missed that detail.
Arezou, do you want to say something, or shall I just go ahead? Thank
You start.
Okay, so this issue of provenance is like we say in Farsi, we have a proverb. We say "Mich dar nale asp," So I don't know whether you have heard about it or not, but it's like basically it's like it's difficult to answer this because we really don't know where they were found, what was the time, what conditions. There are always stories around there. When you talk to people, they say, oh, they were found in a cave. A cave were there. Although about the Persian documents, when it comes from Firuzkoh, that's true. So it's actually some part of them are coming really from a cave. But then when it comes to Bactrian documents, we really don't know. But then also the other issues, as like if you looked at the map I showed, so they're mostly coming from the mountainous regions, mountain regions to the south of Balkh. So far we don't have any single document coming from Balkh itself. So the delta, that inland delta basically. So that's really speaks about the climate, the issues going on there. I mean, lots of changes as well. These documents mostly coming from the mountainous regions, as we know, also from their own contents. So they refer basically to areas, but then where they found as a whole, like, or one by one, or like how, we really don't know. From the 1990s we know about it, or basically there's an article by Professor Nicholas Sims Williams about these documents, when they come out and then reached these hands, and then they started translating, so you can look at them, but then we really don't know how it happened. So it's like, and it's also difficult to talk about it because if you say that these are coming from archaeological context, no, they're not. So somebody gifted them to the museum or archive, no. So it's like basically they come from the market. So who bought them, who deal them, who brought them, who we really don't know a great deal or about them. So it's difficult to talk about the provenance in that sense.
So if I can maybe add, so I just put in the chat a link to a film that we made. Martin, if he's still here, he edited it. But we were able to actually speak to the very people who found the Firuzkoh documents, thanks to another team member, Nabi Sari, who is from the region of Ruhr and Firuzkoh, and was involved when they were found, not at source, but very close. So you can get a story there, whether they're telling the truth or we don't know. But so they claim they came from a cave. But the Bamiyan ones, read my book, and I have a whole section on it. It was quite a bit of detective work, but it's conjecture. We don't know, as Reza says. It's through the antiquities, and the dealers are very precious about their sources. So but also in the case of the Bamiyan papers, basically my theory in the book is that they were first found in the 1930s, actually even sooner, and we have a source for that. When I say they, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know. I don't know where these 222 came from that are in Israel, but what I do know is that in London, there are at least another 500 to possibly 800 currently with two different dealers. And there are more. So our colleague Nabi Sari gets on WhatsApp, Afghans are all on WhatsApp or on Facebook. So on WhatsApp, he gets images sent by his friends all the time. Now, whether they are authentic or not, we can't say from WhatsApp. But point is that they're being dug out of all kinds of places, but not formal.
Let's hear, colleagues, let's hear from Ava Vahedi, Dr. Vahedi. Ava, you have to come up so we can see you before you ask.
Hello. Do you hear me now? Hello.
Yes.
Yes. But also, so
Okay,
there's Ava. Yeah, great. There's Ava, and then Esteban has a follow-up from Teresa. Go ahead, Ava, please.
Hi. Thank you for the great panel. My question is for Reza. I was wondering if he said that it was very fascinating for me to hear that there people could take their legal cases to two different authorities, local and official, I call it. But I was wondering if Reza has taken the nature of the dispute into consideration, whether it was ahval shakhsiye, like the family law and like divorce or marriage or inheritance or these kind of things, which is usually related to religion, even in today's law in many cases, or in any case, the same thing would happen. I mean, whether certain certain nature of legal disputes would go to both courts, or certain things would go to different courts, or in any legal case this could there would be a choice for between the local court and the official court.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate, we don't have many questions to make a kind of conclusion that what type of issue would actually attract, say different courts, or they would go there. But from the documents we really have now, so we have a protection document in Bactrian, the one I showed, and then basically there are some documents related to that document. I didn't show them, but I published all of them in a basically an article called Between the Arabs and the Turks. So you can, see basically all those documents, related to each other. And then we have some Arabic documents, which are basically tax receipts, and also some, legal documents related to Mir's family. So if we put all of them together, what they show us, basically, yes, it's the familial issue. So it's basically mostly have something happen within the household between the brothers, and then it is basically about, the joint ownership of the properties, because, in Bactrian law, as Arezou has already published an article about this polyandry, or polyandrous society, basically in this region. So there was a kind of, tradition at least in this region we talk, not the entire Bactria, but at least, say the southeast of Bactria. So, one basically family had several sons, and these sons would marry only to one woman. So they would basically bring one bride to the family, and then with that they would keep, the properties they had. And these, this type of basically tradition would require a kind of cohabitation and joint ownership. So, and then, so the issues related in the, or say reflected in these documents in Arabic and the Bactrian, there's limited number. They are all related basically to one family, and these are related to the basically disputes between the members of the household about these properties. So women, as like lands and other things, they used to jointly decide about it. So basically, it is a familial issue so far we know. But then who knows? Maybe we would have, more documents in the future to get to know, what is basically happening. But then the most important thing is that this, because there is a kind of coexistence of different system, because the nature of this region is always like this. It was always have been like this, even is today like this. So so basically there are people with different languages, different cultures, and different systems. So if you look at the Bactrian documents, for example, one of them even talks about, says that that I'm doing this deal, this is basically the situation, but then no one can talk about this, like, and then it basically referred to Tazdigan, to Turk, and Robik, Bamyanik, and others. And these are basically not individuals, but this means the area that legal documents could be obtained, means the system. Basically the administration. So because there were different administration, and this different administration would sometimes would be very appealing to some people who would just go and solve their issues, they would go. But then the documents we have, they're actually talking about the familial issues. But then maybe in the future we would know more. But then, as I said, it's exciting because as one family, several members, they can decide to go either to a Muslim one or to a non-Muslim one. And that is, I mean, the nature of this region, which is very interesting. I think there should be one day there should be a proper publication that why do we have this situation in this region? And this is quite unique, basically.
So, okay, we have to really wrap it up, you guys. But before I go to Fatis, I hope I'm saying your name well, and following up on Esteban, by the way, welcome, Esteban. I wanted to say something about our coordinator, the great, and my colleague, the great Malek Karb, who has been with me for the past 4 years, and without whom, Malek, come up, please. Without whom, Malek, yes, without whom, this would not run as smoothly as we see it running. Thank you so much, Malek, for everything through the years. Thank you, thank you. So, Fatis, please go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, hello, good evening from Greece. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. My question is towards Dr. Huseini and probably Arezou. Nice to see you again. Hopefully you can answer this too. My question is, I saw in some of the papers of the documents some Greek letters. I'm actually investigating the Hellenistic Bactria through the Islamic sources. And my question is there any slight Hellenistic or Greek Hellenistic element that survives through maybe some names that changed or something even tiny in those documents?
Wow. Such a, I mean, I guess.
I'll fight this.
Yes, I mean that's a great question. I guess the best place would be DAFA's archive, DAFA delegation for French archaeologists in Afghanistan. So they worked from 1920s almost. So they published on Aït-Khanum, and then they had a kind of special interest in finding Hellenistic, say, cultural heritage in Afghanistan. So they published a lot. And then, so, when you look at the Bactrian, document, and then you saw the language, right? I mean, in the script. So it's quite interesting that this is the only Middle Iranian language is written in this script, right? So, and that's, of course, the legacy of the Greeks, they were there for a long time. And then if you look at, of course, the visual art, you can see it everywhere. So, and then, if you see, I'm not necessarily in these documents, but then if you look at it as a whole, the, one of the characters like Alexander, always say that the Greeks, brought two things to Central Asia that never died. One was opium, one was Alexander. So that, it's like in this region, Alexander is always everywhere. If you go to, say, is basically the title of all great kings. And then if you go even to Delhi in Qutb Minar, and the main inscription is basically, you can see the name of Alexander over there as well. So it's just like basically is there. But then the specific answer to this, question that where, found in, I guess the best thing is to look at the DAFA, works. There are many works, lots of, written things about this, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So let's go back to Esteban's question from Teresa. Quickly, Teresa, did you read it? Oh, so
yes,
Esteban,
I think it's it's more of a comment, but
so we have enough evidence to strongly question the narrative.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Okay. So yeah, I think we are. Yeah, okay. So please join me in thanking all our speakers for giving us the honor of hearing them, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful session. In due course, we will have, once you have your next set of books lined up, in the next 6 books lined up
before that. But anyway, Parvane, we also really want to thank you for having us brought together. It was really really wonderful, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
And
my
thank you
pleasure.
for all the comments from everybody, and everybody is
Yeah.
very engaged and giving really helpful input. So thank you, everyone. And
Yeah.
most of all to you, Parvanajan, for bringing us together.
Oh, you're welcome. It was my pleasure, Arezou. By the way, you guys, there is something that I have to also inform you. Arezou Azad also has an ongoing online sort of seminar, as does Esteban, who has Monday majlises. I don't know how he does it constantly. Yeah. There are plenty to go around. So thank you, everybody. I had a lot of questions, but I got the short end of the stick. Okay. Bye.